Welcome back to the Route 77 podcast. Today, we continue our empowering journey through biblical femininity. In this second part, we dive deeper into the essence of womanhood as portrayed in Proverbs 31, celebrating the virtues that stand the test of time. From wisdom and strength to dignity and entrepreneurship, we explore how these principles apply to the life of the modern single woman. So whether you're just joining us or have been part of our conversation from the beginning, prepare to be inspired as we unravel the beautiful complexity of God's design for femininity. Wisdom.
Because wisdom, I love wisdom. Solomon had great wisdom.
Yes.
Then he threw it out the door.
Yes. Wisdom and preparedness, like you're getting ready for your future. And yes, it might and most likely will include marriage, like the percentages.
Yeah.
Is that, yes, that will be in there. And it may not. But if you're like preparing for, that's why I like to talk about, like how we're living for the moment today with one eye on the heaven is the final destination. Like all the stuff in between doesn't matter specifically what it is if your focus is on where we're going. And if your focus is on the destination of heaven, then how you live, regardless of which lane, you're single lane, married lane, you're doing this job, that job, you have kids, you don't have kids. If you're preparing for heaven, then like everything else will kind of falls under that.
Yeah. And God calls us to be good stewards of the resources he gives us. So regardless of what you think of them, your money, your time, or whatever, these are all gifts that God has given us to use wisely.
And yeah, we're just going to probably zoom through the last few because otherwise we're going to have 3 podcasts because we've been.
We can always do 4 or 5 because I think there was like 8 of them.
Yeah.
You guys had 8 points. We could do 4, then do 4 of my side, and then go back to the last 8.
Yeah.
Or we can do all of them back to back. But
yeah, because I think that a lot of what we were talking about today doesn't just apply to being a woman.
No.
No.
And we're just looking at.
There's a lot of similarities. There is a lot of them, a lot of the points brought up, a lot of the questions I answered have relatively the same response.
Yeah.
And this is just like a description in Proverbs about, again, like people always go, this is what a good wife looks like. And yet they don't form it in actually understanding that this was what a good woman looks like who happened to become a wife. And this is again, not something that was developed on the wedding day.
No.
This was a long-term development of a person.
Yeah.
And cultivations through generations.
Yes. And it's even through lifetime. And yeah, so we like preparing for the future, understanding that heaven is the ultimate future and using your singleness for what it should be. And that's like a preparation or a time of doing what God wants you to do in a situation in life that's different, right, than a married life.
Yep.
Like you have we've talked about it before, unique opportunities that come with being single, and you've got to use those things.
Yep.
Because again, the percentages show that most people will be married, and anything that you develop in singleness will be brought through to your married life.
Yep. And how many times do you hear people who are married and then they're retiring? So we did all this stuff. Now is the time that we can travel and see the world and do all this kind of stuff. And not to put a downer on all of that, but I have heard it time and time again where you've retired and then all of a sudden something happens and all that planning that you had to go and do all that stuff is taken away because sudden illness, sudden death, sudden loss of finances.
But even like the whole idea of preparing for your retirement, it's like your goal is too short.
Yes.
Like if you're preparing for heaven, then the retirement's simply a time that looks different.
Yes.
And still with the ultimate goal is heaven. So it's interesting if you think about it, like if you're a single person or a single woman and you're going, yeah, like when I'm going to become a wife, then I can deal with my, like how I spend my time or like how I develop my character or even like how I read the Bible. I'll do it with my husband. And it's, what you do now is what you're going to do then. And barring some intervention or conviction of the Spirit, hopefully Holy Spirit, which is what happened for, I think, both of us with the devotions.
Yep.
you're not going to do. You might do it for a short time, but your lifetime habits is what will win out.
Yeah. Oh, we saw, my mom was here. We would take our devotion time and do it in your bedroom because you have the big bedroom and you have the chair, and it was easy that way.
Mhm.
So that was 3 weeks. It takes 14 days to develop a habit. So once my mom went home after 3 weeks, where did I go to do our devotion? Wait a minute, we don't have to go to your room anymore. So, you can develop the habit if you make
And
it.
things are easier to do when you're younger.
Yes. Yes.
So a lot of habits developed as a younger person is what's going to be what carries over. And it takes a lot more.
It's harder.
It's a lot
to
harder
do.
to do as you're older, as you get older.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so prepare in your singleness.
Yeah.
Prepare for the ultimate is heaven, not marriage, kids, retirement. Those are just milestones along the way that might come. If you have a trip on a map planned out, you might have little points of interest, but it's not the final destination. Our woman having strength and dignity. So she is not.
Let's back up for a second.
Okay.
I think it's quite important what you guys mentioned, but I think it's quite important to see how we can again cultivate that. Like, how would you suggest we go about cultivating reflectiveness and like, how do I word this? Because we have to instill in young people at the same time the ability to reflect and evaluate their life choices, bad or good, so that they can actually grow in wisdom and in preparedness for a next occurrence. So I think if we have to elaborate on anything, it'd be that. How would you guys suggest that you would evaluate, that you would instill a reflective nature and evaluating nature into?
I think we need to, especially in the church, really emphasize what our goal of life is, and that's the destination of life. Because we get so hung up on these milestones that we're expected to go on. Or we get so hung up on what the next step is as we forget where the final destination is. And as a church and as anybody that's ministering in the church or influencing anybody that's younger, that's coming up and they're trying to figure out what it means to be a human and beyond being a child and all these things, is that we have to really just remember that this is a long-term.
I think it would be really good idea if youth groups aren't doing them now. And I know a lot of youth groups, excuse me, they do a lot of Bible studies and stuff like that. But do they do financial planning? Do they do career orientation? Do they do personal development? What are the gifts that God has given you that you can use? Because, and everybody thinks, oh, look, there's a gift of administration, leadership, pastoring, teacher. There are so many gifts that are listed in the Bible that don't have this spiritual meaning.
Spiritual gifts. Yeah.
Yes, I am a prophet. Yeah, I have yet to meet somebody who's really a good prophet. But
can you get a good job being a prophet?
No, there's no calling for that. Not that I've found.
There's not like a ministry of prophet.
No, no, I haven't seen that very much. But if the youth leaders, and I'm talking about those who are in middle school, high school, because these are the formative years where they need to learn this kind of stuff. Teach them how to manage their finances so that they will become good stewards of the finances that they have once they start working, even when they're going to school.
There's this idea that the church is just supposed to be involved in the spiritual things. And then we forget that it's actually a place of learning and where we're supposed to be teaching people how to be. There's people.
They need to also go into the practical side
because they
of it
will
too.
learn it somewhere. And parents may be able to do that, but at the same time, sometimes parents are not the ones to do that because the kids don't listen.
Parents, whatever,
whatever. But sometimes you'll have a different sort of receptance to other leadership.
Jesus said the same thing. He said it when he tried to teach in his own village. They did not listen.
They would not listen. And it seemed like with careers. I know myself when I was in high school, I really had no idea which way to go. And I had no guidance.
That's like when my brothers were looking, I finished university, but I hadn't really, I came out with a teaching degree, but I hadn't enjoyed what I was doing. So I
Right.
hadn't really decided what I wanted to do. I just went in and flowed this way and did that. And when my brothers were going to choose, I like kept encouraging them to look and see what's available and what you're interested in. Because a lot of times we just think of the obvious. There's teacher, there's doctor, there's lawyer. But let's say you're interested in law, but you're not really wanting to put that many years or whatever, you're not that interested. But there's so many other like professions within legal professions, within the law that you could do, but you don't know of until you actually look it up.
Right. The same. I love animals. The only thing you can think of is maybe I should be a veterinarian. Yeah. I didn't want to go to Prince Edward Island because I lived on this side of the coast. I didn't want to go to that
There's
side
so
of the
many
coast.
things now.
But
like
there are
there's
so
vet
many.
techs, there's
Yep.
you can be an animal chiropractor, massage therapist, biologist. There's so many things that you can do that
So many places.
like
Yep.
that. There's so many. Yeah. So is
Or
it
if you're interested in any kind of a medical, there are so
many
many
other
You
options?
don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a nurse. You could be a lab technician.
Yeah.
You could be the person who goes and takes blood from everybody.
And there's like research specialists.
Research
And there's
specialist.
all these things. So people don't know this. And so if we like
Help them.
really help shape, because it should be a full shaping of their whole person, not just the spiritual side. It's somehow it's dissected from the rest of who they are.
And that goes along with the personal development. It was teaching them how to be people of integrity, how to have good character, how to
And
be.
the whole idea that you become a wife and a mother.
Yep.
And there's almost like, for me, there was no thought outside of that, which is, again, one of the reasons that I didn't do so well in university at the time and didn't really have an aim and a goal because I just wanted to get married. Helping them to think outside that box.
Yes.
Again, there's a high percent chance that will be what happens, but it doesn't mean that's the only thing that has to happen, or that you're in this one box and that's the only option that you have as a young woman or as a single woman of any age.
Yeah.
There's so much more that you can do. So like
Yeah.
giving these young women like that insight that
Yeah.
there is so much more to do to life than not just, I don't want to say just being wife and mother, because
Right.
it is super important and there's people that are called to do that. Only.
And for some women, it's very important. I desperately want to be married. I desperately want to have children. Okay, how to put the brakes on that thought without hurting her desire
Yeah.
and helping her to cultivate. This is a good goal to have. Yes, this may end up.
But it's not where you are, and like,
It's
that's
not
the
where
thing.
you
You
are
have
right
to
now.
live where you are, not where this theoretical future might be, because
Yeah.
you don't know what the future will bring.
And you don't know when that future will happen either.
Mhm.
This is a good thing to have. This is a good desire to have. But what if you don't have that for 10 years?
Yeah. What are you going to do in the meantime? What are you going to do with your singleness?
Yeah.
That's what we want to keep asking.
Exactly.
Did that answer your question, David?
It's more for the audience than it is
Yeah.
for me, because I can't apply this in a sense.
Although a lot of it can be applied, like you said, to both genders.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah,
And-
this
some
is
of
just
it,
specifically
some of it.
pulling things out of this
Right.
about a godly wife.
And if you find yourself at a point in your life where all of that youth has left you, and now you're at the middle, or even, it's never too late to cultivate these
No.
good character traits.
There's plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
And then she shows, like it says, strength and dignity are her clothing. So so basically, like, she'll face challenges and she will go through struggles and trials. And it doesn't mean that she's just like, it doesn't matter. No, like, we all go through, and we seriously go through these things.
Yep.
And there is, again, for young women, desperation to want to be married and have children. And yet this woman sounds like, what happens if she hadn't got married and had children? If you have that strength in your dignity, because your strength is not in that identity, it's in the identity of Christ. If your strength and dignity come from Christ.
And we all
then-
know that even in our weaknesses, God will give us his strength to go through these.
Yeah.
This one is very personal to me with the strength and dignity, because every time my daughter's gone through a time of crisis, I find that I'm the one that's sitting beside her while everybody else is falling apart. I can't fall apart. I don't have that luxury. For me, she is important. Yes, I'm hurting. Yes, I'm falling apart. But I have to take that And I have to move it outside of myself and say, you need to stay there right now because I can't deal with you right now. My strength, my courage needs to be standing beside my daughter and getting her through the crisis first. I'll follow up her later, which you saw that happen to me on.
Yeah, it was just, you were
Yeah.
kind
I just feel, it's been now a week since. And all of a sudden I just felt myself feeling a little raw.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, that doesn't mean you're not strong or dignified.
Right.
Like that's all part of it.
Yeah.
Like you're a human.
Yeah.
And these things are going to happen to you. And but then you can definitely probably, or there's most likely you can come up with examples of people who completely fell apart.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And did not have the strength. And again, we're not saying you specifically, listener, have to have the strength all yourself. No, this is definitely coming from God.
No, I know a person, and I'm not going to say any names because it's neither here nor there. But the person had no faith, and I know that. So, but because of the stresses and struggles in life, and he just couldn't deal with it anymore, and he took his life. There is more than just that, and there are the people that get left behind, and you see the devastation of those who are left behind. There is, even in your weakness, reaching out to God, holding on to Him. Like there was that one time when we weren't sure. When Amber had her operation and the doctor came out and said they had to take her to CT because they thought she had a brain bleed and they want to double check. And that is a very scary thing because a brain bleed is pretty much goodbye. It's done. There's nothing more they can do.
Mm-hmm.
I sat in the chair and people were crying beside me and I'm just hanging on to the robes of Jesus. Like, Jesus, I'm holding on to your robes. Like the woman with the issue of blood. I am holding on to your robes, praying for a miracle. Doctor came back and said there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. But you know that the strength lies outside of yourself.
Yes.
And yet you can not tap into it where it's something you call on and that God's like at your service. It's that
strength is always
you
there. No
have the
matter what.
confidence that it's there for
Yep.
you when you need it. It's there.
Yep. Yeah. It's not a rub the genie lamp and poof, it's there.
Yeah. No.
That strength is always there. You just need to reach out and grab it. And that's what I did that day is I just reached out and I grabbed it and I'm just going to hold on to you because I have nothing else to hold on to.
Yeah. And again, like teaching this to those around you is just one, your actions. You're passively teaching by actions, but also just your words. They need to know that it's there.
Yeah.
It's always for this one here, you can tell them, but until they experience it, it's hard for them to fully understand. And I think too, the same with ourselves, until they can see it happening around them.
Yeah.
That will give them the most to understanding.
Yeah.
That it's there.
Yeah. And not having to go through a crisis in order to realize that it's there.
Mm-hmm. Some things are okay to experience vicariously.
Right. Or even just in a momentary time of, I just don't know how I'm going to go on another day.
Yeah.
And realizing that God has not and never will forsake you, never will leave you. And He said that my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made manifest in your weakness. God will bury His strength in you and lift you up when you can't.
Any additions to that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So you guys talked more about, you guys covered a lot of the stuff. I get a bunch of questions and then it's all covered and stuff. Well, one of the things that I want you guys to elaborate on, mainly for maybe other people, how can young women be able to go out and recognize, say, these kind of values, or so that they can reflect on them? Maybe how can you recognize what strength and dignity will look like in other people? For example, Monique, when you were in the hospital, were the people around you who were crying, were they able to see or recognize how that you were holding it together, but because you had no choice, you had to hold it together? Being able to cultivate the ability to recognize the dignity and the strength within your friends group and family, being able to recognize the attributes of Christ in others. What are your my question is, would there be any suggestions or ways that would help young women being able to recognize these kind of attributes
Um,
in a time of crisis, maybe.
yeah. I don't know specifically. I know that when we were first told of Amber's diagnosis, that the girl closest to Amber, Marlena, she literally crashed. She couldn't breathe. She was hyperventilating. She had to go into emergency. She had to be hooked up to IVs. She needed medication to calm her down. And I think she felt confident enough to allow herself to do that because she knew that I was with Amber and that Amber was in safe hands with me. And that is one of the ways that we can show ourselves to other people by just showing that strength when it's necessary, when it's needed.
And strength doesn't mean emotionlessness.
No, it does not. It's just a confidence that says, you're okay to fall apart. I'm okay to let you do that because I've got it.
Yeah.
I'm here.
And you also know that you could also like, again, it's hard to like specifically point unless you're like pointing it out in other people, because otherwise it feels like you're like boasting or something even
Right.
in it. But like where like ultimately you have faith. And again, that's like the next thing is fear of the Lord.
Yep.
That you have faith in that his ultimate control over the situation.
Yeah. See, I never felt that it was my strength or my confidence that got Amber through any of this. I ultimately knew, regardless of the outcome, that everything was still under God's control. Whether Amber lived or died was all under God's control and not my control.
Mm-hmm.
All that was required of me was to be there.
Be in the moment.
Be in the moment. Yeah. And there were times when I was out driving home and I'd never gone through this experience before. I'm driving home and I just had this urge to just scream. And it scared me because I'd never had that feeling before. And I'm just going, I'm just not going to do that.
I actually have.
Have you?
Yes.
Yeah.
As long as I got through stuff with my ex.
So I just went, wow. And I just cried out to God in that moment for it. God, I need your peace. And I relied heavily on the peace of God that passes all understanding in those times because I knew that I had to let it go for God to do what he needed to do. And there was one song that touched my heart so much where I have nothing. My hands are empty. God, I need you in this moment. And there were times when I broke down and cried. I'd go park my car in a dark part of the parking lot on High Street.
Yeah.
Sat in there and with the car facing the wall and everything, and I just cried until I was emptied. Mm-hmm. And it's okay, God, now it's your turn to take over again.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just I think it's just a building up of the faith again, like fear of the Lord. That's the next one where she says that it says in the Proverbs 31, where did it say? I was reading it. It says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Mm-hmm. And that's where like all of these things that we're talking about is all off of the fear of the Lord. Would not come if the foundation was not the fear of the Lord, or their faith aspect.
If I didn't have that one, and I'm not even going to say it's 100% confidence, it's more like maybe 90% confident that at the end of the day, if Amber went from this life to the next, that she would be in God's presence. I am 90% confident because there's always that 10% that says, because she can't tell me that she believes in Christ. All I can go by is the amount of times that God has worked miraculously through her life that gives me that assurance that she is his no matter what. So maybe it's 99%.
So I'm just going to quickly backtrack to the idea of fear. So what do you mean by fear in the Lord? Because I think there's a distinction between what fear would look like in favor of the Lord and to what we normally know fear as, being afraid or terrified.
Because it's more of a statement that's said especially in the Old Testament when you fear the Lord. And I think it has more, I would say has more to do with understanding of who he is and what he can do.
A reverent.
Yeah, a reverent, like an awe.
Yeah.
of that.
And not, it's a scary thing. Run.
But it could be that if you decided to really go against him in a sense.
Yeah.
Because like a person that like you're like if you have a father who's been a good father figure in your life, there is a certain point where you might have a fear of him if there was in a situation where
No, if you've done a bad thing.
if you've done a bad thing. And it's not fear, there's a different fear of when you're abused and a fear of when you've been caught out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that, like for me, I never wanted to disappoint my dad. I didn't fear that he would disown me, that he would beat me to a senseless pulp, or that he may yell and but it was more the tone of his voice that says, I am disappointed in you.
Yeah.
That I did not want to hear that. Yeah.
So it's just like you do not, that desire to not want to disappoint God. And that's just
and that's out of love.
Yeah. But understanding of who he is to the point of like, I always remember that part of the language of Morjo. And like when they talk about meeting Aslan and they're like, will you be scared? And he's, of course he'll be scared. But then they're like, but he is good. And there's a sense of that, like most powerful being can create fear, but he is good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard one to define, isn't it? Yeah. Because it is a fear. It's not a terror.
No.
Unless you're not a child of God.
Yeah. And there might.
I would represent it as a fear of deep respect or relevant, or what was that word?
Reverence. A reverent fear.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So it'd be more of a deep respect, a reverence, and an awe of power, holiness, and love.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how the Bible shows the fear of God.
Yeah. 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 It's that understanding that he is so holy that without Jesus Christ, we could never stand in his presence in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
What happened when Moses where he had to hide his face in the cleft of a rock because he could not gaze upon the glory of the Lord
And live. Yeah.
and live. So it's that kind of feeling is I can't.
It's so big, you can't anything but.
You're right.
It's like hard things.
Okay. If I look at this, I'm going to die. Okay. We cannot look at this. But it's also that he is God. I don't know how to.
Yeah. It's just like it's a feeling. It's like an emotion that's not coming in words.
It's a massive, huge.
If you know it, then you know it.
True.
I think the last 3 points that we have to make have to do with outside of the woman, in a sense. One is that this woman, this wife, also receives recognition. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. And these are the people that would mean the most to her, that are around her, that are seeing these things. And this isn't something that she's going to ask them to do. So that's what I'm saying, like from a single person's perspective, it's not something that they're going to try to do. But as a community, a church community, and as people around single women, we can recognize the fact that single women are important and that the things that they do are important. And
the things that are important to them is important too.
It's really important to us. And so we can create just like a place where they can be recognized. And that's the thing, like that's so hard as a single woman, especially when you have this idea that wife and mother, like when you're single, it's like, does anything mean anything at all? All the recognition in churches generally go to engagements, marriages, anniversaries, babies, births. And then as a single person, you're like, does anything I do matter?
Yes.
And we need to remind people that they matter.
Yes.
And I think that the people that are important to them should be their church family. And if they aren't the ones lifting them up, and I'm not saying give like a crazy praise where you're just like, good girl, way to go, here's a star. There's actual things when they've done something well and they've lived out these things that they actually recognize them and by the people who should be closest to them, which is their family and their church family.
Yeah. We have a single girl who has taken on the children's ministry. And she's also going through a university and stuff like that. And she's only doing it part-time, but she's already gained. They've already given her the recognition of being somebody who was influential.
Mhm.
And she did this thing for the kids. It's a new thing that the kids do, which is cool. It's like, oh, okay, I can get on board with this. Where they get all the kids before they go to kids' church and go up to the front of the church. And the congregation says, "The Lord be with you." And the children say, "And also with you." And then they go up to, but she started that.
Mhm.
And she's just a young thing. She just,
Just from the song.
oh,
It's in my head now. I had to finish it. Sorry. She's a young thing and cannot leave her mother.
you're funny.
So,
But
yeah, one of the things we'd like to do is have a singleness Sunday and a celebration of singles where we actually, like, one, recognize them specifically as being singles and worthwhile and part of the church and love. But two, for the congregation to see that there are singles that are like,
that the
a
single
part of-
life is not something to be.
yeah, like they're providing in the church, they're doing stuff in the community, they're developing character of people that you want to be in the church, and that you don't have to wait for them to get married or have a baby or have an 87th birthday before you say anything.
Right?
Look, that's something we can do as a church, I think, and even try, yeah, as a church community and
Yeah.
people around you, even if you have friends and stuff, you'd be like, you know what, I love that you're doing this.
Yes.
And it's great that you're, and then fill in the blank.
Recognize even yourself as a single person. Recognize the single people around you. And when, especially if you recognize that they've done something huge, and it doesn't have to be like a huge, they've gone out of the way to do something. Give them a little bit of, you did a good job. Thank you.
And again, the next one, I want to, it's like we mentioned it earlier in the thing.
The
Is that she talks about like where she considers a field and she buys it.
Yes.
It's like the entrepreneurship spirit that's there. And it tends to be more like acceptable as a guy
Yes.
than as a woman.
Yes.
And because why are you doing this when you're just going to get married? Or it's somehow a waste.
Yeah. Why do you want to be a CEO of a company?
Yeah. And yes. So it's, I think,
It's a lot of work.
yeah.
A lot of work. I think over the weekend I didn't sleep for 25 hours.
My friend Esther, she's married. She is married, but she's a CEO of a company. And she has traveled all over the States and stuff for her company because her company is huge.
Mhm.
But she's the CEO.
Yeah.
She runs the company.
But there's this idea that like women are somehow wasting their time because they're just going to get married and have kids. So then you're just wasting time and money and energy.
She's married and has kids.
I
She's
know.
not with
But when you're a single person, like there's like this sometimes, especially in the church community, there's this sort of like, hey, but
shouldn't I be doing this, that, and the other thing?
or even I've heard like where they like recommend that just go and take something in college that's useful as like a mother, like go learn hair cutting or something that you could use it like nursing even, because then you can use it as, and you're like, why? If you feel God calling you to something that's bigger and not better, but just different.
Yep.
Then go for it if that's what you feel God's calling is.
Yep.
But also understand that if you're going to put yourself into a debt of hundreds of $1,000s, become a doctor, and then just be like, oh, I'm just going to be a wife and mom and forget that, then you're going to have to pay that debt off with your spouse.
Yep.
You have to make decisions too of that would be wise.
Yep. Yeah. If you're going through school to become a doctor.
Yeah. I know one lady, she was a vet for large animals. And when she got pregnant and had kids, she just moved over to small animals because she didn't think it'd be safe when she was pregnant and things like that. And so she just has small animals now.
Yep.
And so she's able to what her life was like from one to the other. But I don't think there's not enough like encouragement of people, of the young women who have the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can recognize somebody who has that, don't discourage them from it.
Encourage them. You don't know what God's calling them to do. And finally, where we want to talk about like basically their legacy, their influence. It's a person who has developed all these characteristics is someone like, look, this is how many thousands of years later, and we're reading about this woman.
Yeah. Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah. There's just so many like that can live on beyond your life. And Lydia
and Ruth.
And all these women outlived their legacy well past their lifetime.
Yep.
And
you gotta also keep in mind that the legacy idea only works within the idea that there is, it only works through Christ. If you don't have that kind of Christ-like connection, that relationship, that idea that he died for your sins and now you get to go to heaven, that legacy doesn't work. Legacy may last 1,000, 2,000 years, but 4,000 years later, it's gone. So there has to be a moment that you realize that legacy has to be able to be something that is persistent through.
Yeah.
Right?
Even if you have a shorter legacy, you can still influence people around you, and then it could influence for years beyond, but no one even knows that it was you.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. It's that your influence that ultimately points back to Christ has an impact beyond your lifetime.
Yeah.
And there's the potential for
Yes,
that.
but that explanation of legacy would only work if you didn't believe in Christ. Because the end times would suggest that everything is wiped out. So in order for your legacy to even persist after that point, you'd be through heavenly.
You probably
Heaven.
won't need a legacy in eternity
No,
because
you don't.
what is your legacy?
Christ is.
Legacy implies that once you're gone, those who once knew you will hold your traditions and values. But within the context of Christ in heaven, you don't have the concept of legacy because it's all in one place already. Everything is, you'll be able to know the people and etc.
Yeah, but I guess what we mean here is that, like, God can use us beyond our immediate realm of influence. It can go beyond your physical location, like worldwide, but it can also go beyond like your lifetime. And God can use that. Like, you just see story after story of Christian women throughout the years and missionary women and things like, and men too. Not saying that, we just talk about women at the moment, that's all. But like how God uses their stories beyond their lifetimes. And yeah, so that's like, we can, like a married people can leave more of a legacy, say, on their children and nephews. And even the children that I teach in Taekwondo and the people that I come across, to be the type of person that hopefully shows Christ, reflects Christ, so that it creates an impact on the people beyond my immediate area of influence. But that's what I was thinking with the legacy part. So now that we've talked about this, okay, we've talked about the entire entire chapter from verse 10 on. It's basically the woman in chapter 31, this virtuous wife. How does this apply to our original topic we're talking about is femininity? What part of any of these things, from character and virtue, trustworthiness, industriousness and work ethic, generosity and compassion, preparedness and wisdom, strength and dignity, fear of the Lord, recognition and rewards, entrepreneurships, legacy and influence, what does that have to do with our outward appearance and how we present ourselves, feminine or however the world or the culture or society says?
Maybe that's where society is missing the mark, is because they revolve so much around the outward appearance. But the thing is that the outward appearance, when you're a young girl, you think you're going to hold on to your beautiful looks. You're not. I hate to tell you this, but you're going to get to a point where your body is going to start failing you. You're going to start sagging in places you don't want to sag in. You're going to develop wrinkles, whether you like it or not. Your hair is going to go gray. That beautiful, youthful skin you have in your 20s is not going to follow you when you're in your 50s, 60s, whatever. I mean, there are cosmetics, and there are so many women who spend so much money tucking and stretching and fixing and plumping and pushing. And why are you doing all of that to yourself? Because it's not the outward part of you that is
and that's
the
not the
beautiful
thing
part.
that's going to be ultimately remembered.
No.
Or it may be for the wrong reasons.
But yeah, right?
But like when you talk about this is a description of a woman of
But was
God.
there anything in there that said about her, how beautiful her face, how gorgeous her form, how long and luxurious her hair? I didn't read that.
No, it was nothing to do with her physical appearance.
No.
And yet
It's all
she
about
had
her.
the love of her husband, the love of her children, the love of the people at the gates, respected her husband because of her
Yeah.
actions, because he was the one in the public sphere. And like all this stuff developed from the person, the character, the quality of the woman.
I will say, when I look in the mirror, a lot of my view of myself has changed quite drastically in the last little while. But it used to be I would look at myself in the mirror and I think, you are so ugly. I used to think that way. I don't do that to myself as much anymore. It is still coming. But nothing showed me so much than the past 3 weeks of how many people care about me, that I was blown away by it. And it showed that I may not be the most beautiful jewel in the jewelry box, but there are some people who chose to have me around. So I was just like, that's pretty darn cool. And I can only say that it's got to be what God has worked through me and has given me the qualities that gentleness, kindness, self-control. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Some of these things are all a work in progress for us all. We're not 100% perfect there. But the reflection of Christ.
The reflection of Christ, it has obviously must be there because for some reason people like me. I don't know what's up with
But
that.
it's interesting when you think about, when you find out the people who have been helping, like you're not going, she's really pretty one, and he was like the handsome one, or she's a millionaire. Like you're thinking about the generosity of their heart and
Yep.
the character of the person that was helping.
Yeah.
That's the thing that.
Yeah. And these are the things that I will carry with me. It's just like these people cared for me at a time when I was unable to care for myself. And they helped me so greatly. And their character shines, and that's their legacy to me.
Mhm.
If you're thinking that you need to leave this huge, massive legacy for the whole wide world to see, one person is enough of a world to leave a legacy to.
Exactly. And if you want a description of femininity, this podcast hopefully has given it to you.
I hope so. Yeah.
Because there's too much.
Too much emphasis on the outward part.
Yeah.
God looks on the heart. And that's where
we ultimately generally tend to look at people and see what, if they're out inward. I don't think everybody does. They go a lot by, some people go by looks alone, but there's a lot of people, they may start with looks, but then they go, wow, that inside doesn't really match that outside.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that people are really ultimately looking for, is the true person.
They may be attracted to your outward appearance at first, but once they start testing your character, that's when the rubber hits the road.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's our podcast. I think this is going to be a two-parter. This was a two-parter. This is like 2 hours long.
We're still
So that's probably good. We wanted to really give this chance to really dig deep into these parts of the characteristics of a feminine woman. And and next time we can look at the characteristics of a masculine man.
And not a toxic man. That may come up.
We'll talk about toxic masculinity, I think, too. Because
that's a catchword right now.
Yeah,
and I think it's a horrible thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to have another 2 hour. Is that the plan? Another 2 hour podcast?
2 hour podcast.
Look, I will come in with a lot prepared for that.
Perfect. Perfect. I hope that you enjoyed these podcasts. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Please let us know what you think, if you agree, if you disagree, or what you think if your definition of femininity has changed or not. But you can also email us at route77ministries@gmail.com. That's ROUTE 77ministries@gmail.com. And we'll see you here next time to talk about masculinity.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Route 77 podcast as we wrap up the second part of our exploration into biblical femininity. It's been a journey of discovery and affirmation, recognizing the multifaceted roles women play and the strength they possess. As we close this chapter, remember that your worth is not dictated by your relationship status, but by the virtues you uphold and the legacy you build. stay tuned for our upcoming podcast series where we shift our focus to masculinity, uncovering the biblical standards and virtues that define manhood. Until next time, keep walking in wisdom and strength. And remember to live your single life to its fullest.